Hey everybody, welcome to The Dark Parade. My name is Bo, I am your host. I have a little bit of a cold right now, thanks to working with children who are nothing but giant disease vectors. And I think I caught something from one of them, but look, I just enjoy blaming things on the children I teach. It doesn't really matter if they actually infected me with illness or not. I just like using them as a convenient scapegoat. How you doing? How you been? Life has been strange on my end of late. I don't know if you have paid attention to some of the side episodes where there have been kind of, drips and drabs of me talking about personal life stuff. I've still been managing to put out an episode every week. But here recently, my girlfriend and I broke up, which meant that, my dealing with kids on a permanent basis broke up as well, which is a bit of a bummer. And so I ended up having to move back into the house I was prepping to be rental property. And none of that is terrible. At the end of the day, things work out the way that they should and all. But it has been very hectic as I'm trying to wrap up the school year as, not just a first year teacher, but like a first, few months teacher, and also go through a breakup and also move. That has been taxing, to say the least. And even as I say it out loud, there's part of me that's like, did I do all of that in the past handful of months? And the answer is yes. All of those things happened in relatively short order, which is crazy. That is, all of those things are major things that you should deal with one at a time. And I was doing them all at once. Still am doing a couple of those things, all at the same time. So apologies if the output has been sporadic or perhaps not as in depth. But the upside, I guess, of all these massive life changes is that I've had some time in the evenings to actually watch movies, and so now I bring to you a little bit of a review roundup. I still don't quite have the time to do the full-on episodes again, but I'm getting there. The problem is the teaching takes a lot of time. It turns out that you can't just wing it. You can't just walk into a classroom, look at the kids, and be like, all right, what do you think you should learn today? You actually have to have a plan. And sometimes even that goes horribly awry when you go to first period and you're like, hey, here's my plan for the thing I was going to teach today. And the kids just reject it. Just are like, I have no interest in learning this thing in the way you are presenting it. And so you gotta be a little nimble. It's fascinating. And I'm curious, there's not really a great teacher podcast out there that I'm aware of. And there's part of me that's like, I should do something like that. But then I realize, why on earth would I do something like that? I can barely do the podcast that I really enjoy doing. And that sounds like something I would have to work really hard at. And I'm already working really hard at 3 different things. So enough of that. But I did watch the movies and I wanted to discuss them. And I'm going to do this in, not necessarily in the order that I like them, but in the order that I feel like it makes the most sense to talk about them. And so the first thing I'm going to watch is a Shudder movie, or talk about that I watched, is a movie from Shudder called Kids vs. Aliens by a guy named Jason Eisner. And Jason Eisner is an interesting director because he's worked in genre stuff, but also has one foot squarely in the realm of wrestling. He's directed some of the Dark Side of the Ring web series, or not web series, but television series. Has a show called Tales from the Territory that he's directed that is all about sort of local, lo-fi sort of wrestling organizations and venues and so forth. And that seemed interesting. I don't have a whole lot of interest in wrestling personally. I've dipped my toes back into it of late. A couple of years ago. Now, maybe not even that long. And I gave it the old college try of, hey, do I like wrestling? And the answer was no. I don't really like wrestling very much. It's fine, but my time is so limited. to do just about anything, and that's not a thing I really care to do, or the wrestling side of stuff. So wrestling is not my bag, but that's okay, man. I like people who like wrestling, and I hear about it, and that's kind of fun. I get it sort of secondhand, and I think that's my preferred method of ingestion for wrestling stuff, is to hear people talk about it. But at any rate, Jason Eisner did the segment, like, not only would you know him from the wrestling stuff, but he did a segment on VHS 2 back in the day, about 10 years ago, which is crazy. I think VHS 2 is 10 years old. But there was a segment of that involved a bunch of kids having a slumber party, and then aliens show up and bomb in on their game and cause a big stir. He also directed Hobo with a Shotgun, if you recall that movie with Rutger Hauer. But the reason I bring up the VHS 2 segment, though, is that this feels like an extension of that idea. And I would be surprised, I haven't watched interviews about Kids vs. Aliens with Eisner, but I would be surprised if he did not express it in that way. It seems to me that it is logical that this would be a sort of reimagining, an expansion of some of the ideas in that segment, which I thought was okay. And Kids vs. Aliens is a movie that is very steeped in sort of 80s nostalgia. It's got, there is a hint of wrestling in it, as some kids are doing some backyard wrestling stuff, and they're filming themselves. So there's some, lo-fi movie making stuff going on. There's a brother and sister dynamic. The sister's a little older, and there's a hint of she is starting to grow up and maybe leaving behind the younger brother and his movie making shenanigans, and instead she's going to be much more of a young adult. Like, she wants to go out and go to parties and get laid and drink and do stuff like that, and he wants her to just be the nerdy sister that he's always loved. And she's sort of torn between those two worlds. And one fateful night, when the parents are out of town and the sister, the older sister, is sort of seduced by a young Turk locally to throw a party at her house, throw a big rager. And even though it has like synth music and it's shot like an 80s movie and it's kind of lit like an 80s movie, it is very much a modern day movie in that there are cell phones and stuff like that. So it is not just, it's not set in the 80s. It's not a period piece, but it has that vibe. It has a very distinct 80s feel to it. And so this night that they throw the rager, aliens show up and start to abduct people and bomb in on their shit. And, basically abduct people into this skull-shaped spaceship. And some they turn into goo. One presumes to eat. Some they make mutants. And it turns out that the guy that was seducing the older sister is a real shitheel, and the kids have to sort of save the day. But it's mostly the older sister. It's sort of her story, and her discovering where she belongs and what she likes and where she fits in and so forth. And a lot of that stuff I really like. The thing that I don't care for in the movie is that it feels very routine. It's directed with energy, and there's a real sense of fun to it, but it also comes in the wake of things like Psycho Gorman and, any number of films that are kind of trading on that 80s nostalgia. And this plays it, it's comic. There's a horror comedy element to it, but it plays it kind of straight. And I think the thing that I loved about something like Psycho Gorman is that it both embraces the 80s camp and also does something with it. It has something to say about it. And Kids vs. Aliens it just seems to enjoy being that thing. That it enjoys living in that nostalgic place without necessarily commenting on it. It's what makes Scream 5 so good to me, is that it has these nostalgic elements calling back to the original Scream series and the original movies, but it has a different perspective, and it has that distance and comments on it in a way that feels of it, but not about it, if that makes sense. The trick is to be the game, but not of the game. And that is the trick I think Psycho Goreman pulls off, is to be of the 80s, but not... to be the 80s, but not of the 80s. Whereas Kids vs. Aliens seems to be perfectly content being of the 80s as well as being the 80s. And that's probably more esoteric than it needs to be, but that's how I felt about it. And I don't think it's a bad movie. And there are moments I really liked. It's shockingly gory at times. Maybe not shockingly, that's probably overstating it, but it's surprising, the level of gore that it achieves. And some of those effects are really fun. The kids, I don't think, are terribly memorable. One is because of what happens to him, which I suppose is a slight spoiler, in that one kid has a thing that happens to him, and that makes him more memorable. The sister is certainly the focus and the more memorable character, and I think she's good in it. But I don't think that it's quite enough to carry the movie. And Phoebe Rex is her name, and like I said, I think she's quite good in that role. But the rest of it is there's the shitty boyfriend that is shitty, or would-be boyfriend, and that's not terribly surprising, that he turns out to be a shitheel, and he finally gets what's coming to him, and that's pretty satisfying, but it happens in a way that's very expected. It makes perfect sense because it's really been telegraphing his fate for some portion of the movie. But again, familiar isn't bad. It just doesn't mean that it's, it doesn't really do anything that's exciting. And it was fun. I had a good enough time during the watch. I don't dislike the movie. But, as far as a recommendation, it's if you got 90 minutes to rub together and you feel like watching something that's a little... a 80s throwback kind of movie, and that, wets your whistle, then by all means. One thing that I thought was strange about it, and maybe it's because I'm just old and cranky, but I got a little put off by how vulgar the kids are. And as someone who teaches high school, I know that preteens and teenagers are incredibly vulgar. So it's not that I think that it's, dishonest in its handling of the way that these kids speak. I just don't care for it. At a certain point, I was this, we're approaching Eddie Murphy Raw levels of the use of the word fuck. And that's fine. I just, for it being a movie about kids fighting aliens, it would have been nice if it were, I don't know, not family friendly. That's not what I'm getting at. Just not as, acidic on the way down. It's a bitter movie with a weird aftertaste. But it, like I said, there was plenty about it I enjoyed. I don't think it's great. This landed right around 2.5, 3 stars for me, where I'm it's not so routine that I think it's just an average movie that has nothing to recommend it. Because it does have moments for sure, and I laughed a time or two, and I thought again, Phoebe Rex as Samantha did a fine job. She's a fun character, and seeing her kind of make the transition to badass is fun to see. I think that goes on a little long, and it ends in a weird place. And it kind of, speaking of the ending felt unnecessarily grim. I mean, it's not like an apocalypse happens or anything, but it doesn't give you the satisfaction of just letting the good guys win after this night of terror. And that also I found a little off-putting in terms of just the vibe I walked away from with this movie. So that's Kids versus Aliens. And of the three movies I'm going to talk about, it's the movie I enjoyed the least, but I still thought it was okay. That said, let's talk about the movie that I enjoyed a whole lot, surprisingly, more than I expected to, was the M. Night Shyamalan thriller, Knock at the Cabin, which I'm late to the party on this one, but that's mostly because I saw Old, and I thought Old sucked out loud. And a lot of people, I think, liked it much more than I did, certainly. I didn't care for Old at all. I thought the acting was wooden. I thought the dialogue was terrible. And maybe it helps that this movie is based on a book. M. Night Shyamalan's got a writing credit, but other writers are on it. And I would like to read the book. My understanding is that the book's a little bit different. But the premise of it is pretty simple, which is a same-sex couple, two guys and their adopted daughter, are taking a vacation at this cabin in the middle of nowhere. And the movie opens with the little girl, Wynn, outside catching grasshoppers, and up rolls Dave Bautista, as happens when you're in the woods. I don't know if you go camping a lot, but it turns out if you go camping and open a jar of grasshoppers, Dave Bautista appears. It's just something that happens. And he shows up and he basically says, hey, I want you to know that I'm your friend no matter what happens. And then three other pals show up, all of them with these homemade weapons that, like, one of them's a pitchfork tied to a shovel or something, and one of them's this weird flail-looking thing. But the end result is they are these gnarly-looking weapons, and they surround the house, they break in. Again, slight spoilers, I guess, for the first 20 minutes of Knock at the Cabin, and then present them with this horrible choice, which is, hey, we have been shown these visions. We are not here to hurt you. In fact, we can't. It would be against the visions if we lay hands on you. But between the three of you, you have to decide who in your three-member family is going to sacrifice themselves for the sake of the entire world. Because if you don't sacrifice anybody, then these cataclysms are going to occur, and it's going to get worse and worse. And if you keep at it, the only people left on the face of the planet are going to be the three of you walking around on a burning cinder. And that's the premise. And the question is, are these people crazy? Are they for real? If they are for real, where is the proof? Are they going to be able to convince these two, husbands, and, less so the daughter, but are they going to be able to convince them that, like, yes, we're for real, and also we need you to do this thing? And it's really interesting. The thing I like about it, it's like Dave Bautista is in it. Jonathan Groff, who I probably know best from the Manhunter series, but apparently he was also in King George, or played King George in Hamilton, and was one of the voices in the original Frozen. He's a good actor, been on a lot of stuff, and has acquitted himself well in all of that stuff. And surprise, surprise, he's also really good in this. And it's him. There is another guy named Ben Aldridge who is in it, who plays the other husband. And you might know him from movies like Spoiler Alert, and in the show Pennyworth, and in a bunch of stuff I've never seen. Like, I never watched Fleabag, and he was in that. So a lot of stuff I just don't know. So what are you gonna do? Anyway, he's good in it. And Rupert Grint, the guy who played Ron Weasley, is in this, and he's actually quite good in this. Also, M. Night Shyamalan, like I said, I was really off on Old. I never saw Glass. I thought Split was good, but he's just one of those directors who's real up and down. You know, you're never quite sure what to expect with an M. Night Shyamalan movie. Sometimes it's a winner, sometimes you're scratching your head like, why on earth did this very talented filmmaker make this movie? But I would much rather have a director who's taken wild swings, and sometimes it connects and sometimes it doesn't. But when it does connect, it's not just solid. It is like, oh wow, this is one of the best movies I've seen in a little while. And that's kind of how I felt about Knock at the Cabin. I thought it was incredibly tense. I thought that the performances were across the board really good. I thought it presented a great dilemma. The way that it sort of convinced you what was happening, and whether, and playing with the ideas of, is it real, is it not, were these men targeted because they're a same-sex couple, were they not? All of that stuff really, really worked for me. And it's got a satisfying conclusion, which is a big problem of M. Night Shyamalan movies, is sometimes, you know, there's like a twist at the end, and this doesn't really have that. There's not really a twist ending, other than, you know, the reveal of, is this real, is this not real, what are the ultimate fates of our characters? You know, that's not really twisty, that's just a thing. And that's how, you know, movies work and stories work. But I really just loved it. I thought it was really compelling. I was just totally bought into it the entire time. It is a wonderful story about love and sacrifice, and, you know, good people being forced to do bad things sometimes, and, you know, the responsibility we have to our fellow man. M. Night Shyamalan really moved the camera around a lot. It was a really dynamic film to watch, even though it's sort of a single setting movie for the most part. There are some flashbacks here and there to other locations, but for the most part, it is, you know, these actors in a cabin most of the time just talking. And Dave Bautista, who I don't know that I ever really considered a great actor, I think he's fun. I really enjoyed the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and I think he's very funny in those. But I don't know that I gave him any credit for being a legitimately good actor. And even after Glass Onion, which I think he's fine in, but then just recently I watched Army of the Dead, and just nobody comes off looking good in that. So why on earth would I think that he's a good actor? But Bautista is very, very good. He's like heartbreaking at times and threatening at times, but he's this kind of mild-mannered guy, even as big as he is. And I think that's one of the things that I really liked about it, is that he does feel threatening, but not because of anything he says or because of his tone. He's just a big dude. And so hearing him talk about, like, look, none of us want to be doing this, and I know this seems crazy, but we had to, and here's why. And also him doubting himself at times, and it's just a great performance. It's a really good performance from Dave Bautista, where he's a really wonderful kind of, anti-hero in some ways. But I really enjoyed it. I just can't say enough good things about Bautista in this, as well as Jonathan Groff, who I thought was absolutely terrific. And now that I think about his performance as King George, I will double down and say that maybe he's one of the more underrated actors working right now. Like, the roles that he is right for might be particular, but the one, like, he's absolutely terrific in Hamilton, as well as in this, and as well as in Manhunter. So, yeah, I can't say enough good things about it. Like Knock at the Cabin. I'm a stingy reviewer when it comes to movies I really like, because I'm like, I need to go back and watch this again and make sure that I like it as much the second time, that it's got the same impact that I really enjoyed it. But I mean, it's a solid 4-star movie. It might actually be more than that. The more I think about it, the more I kind of like it. So yeah, it's a really solid movie, and I hope you see it. It is available right now if you're on the Peacock, which is kind of like being on the Crocodile. If you're on the Peacock, then it is streaming there. That's how I caught it. It was just kind of a whim of like, you know what? I should really watch this Knock at the Cabin thing. Finally, I know that a lot of people said it was pretty good, and then I'll be damned, I watched it, and it was not just pretty good. It was really good. I really, really enjoyed it. Thought it was a terrific movie. So yeah, there's your Knock at the Cabin, and let's wrap things up with a look at the latest movie on this list of 3 movies that I have here, and that is Evil Dead Rise. And Evil Dead Rise was a movie that, if memory serves, I think this is correct, was originally going to be a straight to HBO Max kind of thing. And then I don't know whether just all the shakeup at HBO Max, or they just, the HBO people decided, hey, we don't want to let this movie, which we really like, be wasted on a streaming service. We want to put it in theaters. Or maybe it was in that Batgirl arena of like, hey, we just don't have a place for this, and we're just going to put it out in theaters and see what happens. But I feel like there was some confidence in it. I really feel like Warner Brothers had a sense of what they had here. And Evil Dead Rise, directed by Lee Corman, who is the guy who did another like creepy movie called The Hole in the Ground a few years ago. And Evil Dead Rise is not really a reimagining, and it's not really a sequel to any of the movies. It's just sort of another chapter. It kind of sits alongside the other movies without being, this is the thing of like, it's an Evil Dead movie, but it's not necessarily of Evil Dead movies. It does a slightly different thing. And reimagines it in a way that isn't just a crass kind of reboot. But the premise is that there's an earthquake in LA. 2 estranged sisters are, reuniting in an old apartment building in LA, along with one of their families, like their 3 kids. Turns out the husband has recently left. One of the sisters has recently come home, or come to visit the sister because she found out she was pregnant, and has been on the road with a band touring. And after there's an earthquake, it turns out that the apartment building they're in was an old bank. And in a vault, one of the kids discovers the Kandarian Book of the Dead. And one thing leads to, as well as some vinyl records, and one thing leads to another, and the Kandarian demons are released, and they infect the mother, or they possess the mother in the film. As played by Alyssa Sutherland, plays Ellie, the mother, in this. And oh my goodness, is she good. Oh my goodness. Alyssa Sutherland is a real something in this movie. But before we get to any of that, let's talk about its Evil Deadness, because there is an argument I can see being made that Evil Dead is, the original 3 movies. It's Evil Dead, Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness. There was the remake / reboot, which is fine. I like it. I think it's gory. I think it's fun. I do think that the characters are a little too stupid even for me at times, but there's some good gory moments in it. This movie maybe has the most interesting character dynamics of any of the Evil Dead movies. And that's not saying a lot, because most of them are pretty thin on characterization. It's more, plot and gag driven as films more than they are character driven. And this has some real character weight, I found, between these two sisters and the mother and her kids, and the kids between each other. Like, there's a definite sense of family there, and how those family members relate to one another and so forth. And yeah, so I like how all of that stuff is set up. It's kind of a dark and stormy night kind of movie. I mean, it's a horror movie. And I like the fact that this did find its way into theaters being a horror movie, because it gets to the business of being an Evil Dead movie pretty quickly. And then once it is, it plays a little fast and loose with the mythology. There are definitely Kandarian demons. They definitely possess people. They definitely cause chaos. That's their vibe. And there are nods and winks and references to the other movies. Most of them are pretty, not vague, but they're not pointed enough to be like, remember when, Ash said that? There are a couple that are very much like, oh yeah, like he said in that movie. But those are, there are demons shouting "Dead by Dawn." And I'm kind of fine with that. Like, yes, it references the other movies, but that just feels like, oh, well, that's what these demons do. Like, they fuck with you. They're telling you that you are not going to survive the night. And they take glee, take a lot of pleasure in just making themselves as frightening as possible and as disruptive as possible. So I liked all of that stuff. So, the mom, Ellie, is who gets the first possession. And Alyssa Sutherland is fantastic. She, all of this was filmed in New Zealand, I think. And I think she is Australian. And so her accent is very good. There's that great bit in the trailer, which it works just as well in the movie, where she's talking to her daughter, and she is all Evil Deaded out and pale and face cracked and eyes all fucked up and whatnot, and very pleasantly says, "Open up now," to her daughter, that I really like. It's really unsettling. But one of the things that I really like about her character is that there is a moment when she is first possessed where she has the self-awareness to say to her sister, "Don't let them get my family. Don't let them get my babies." And then she's just a villain the rest of the movie. And she is scary and manipulative and violent and all of that. It's really a wonderful villain performance, where she clearly enjoys being bad. Like, this demon loves being evil and loves torturing. All of that stuff is terrific. And so Alyssa Sutherland, terrific in it. The other sister that is battling Ellie is Jessica, played by Anne-Marie Thomas, I think is right. And she is very good in it as well. There's the kid performers are all very good. It's just a well-cast, well-acted film. There are definitely moments where you're like, oh, these kids are being real dumbasses, but they're also kids, and kids do dumbass stuff. They, do stuff that shoot themselves in the foot all the time. I can, speak from experience. That just happens. And so put under pressure, kids continue to do dumb shit. But there are some good gags, right? Like, what are Evil Dead movies? They are set pieces and gags and demons fucking with the humans. And this movie has all of that. Some of the set pieces are great. There's one that I wish was a little bit better, where you sort of see some carnage happening through the peephole in a door, and I wish that was a little grander. But there's also moments that are just absolutely terrific. There, of course, is a chainsaw in the movie. Like some people really get fucked up. There's some good eye trauma. It's bloody. Oh my goodness, this movie is bloody. There's an elevator scene with blood that rivals The Shining in terms of sheer blood volume. It's a really satisfying, fun, gory, intense romp. And it's not gonna change your life, but if you like Evil Dead movies, this is a nice entry into that franchise. I think Lee Cornyn does a fantastic job with the material. It is not one-to-one analogous to the original series. It plays with some of that stuff in slightly different ways. Like there's some stuff that happens that are like, oh, I've never seen this in an Evil Dead movie before. And I think that's kind of the joy of it, is there's plenty of stuff that is recognizable, and you will understand the references and be able to nudge your buddies and say, look, she said the thing. I don't think anyone says groovy, just to warn you if you were either worried or looking forward to that. I don't believe that ever happens in the movie. There are some other, ashisms that make their way into the dialogue, but not a groovy as far as I can recall. So all of that said, with all the differences, it still manages to be an Evil Dead movie. It still manages to be something that is fun and occasionally silly. Its sense of humor is dark, to be sure. It's not as slapsticky as the Raimi movies. It doesn't tread into that Three Stooges territory, but it is darkly comic at times. And so I really enjoyed it. I thought it did just enough different to make me feel like I was watching something new and fresh, and also was familiar enough that I really felt like I was watching an Evil Dead movie. And I liked all of that. So I'm curious. I hope they do another one of these, and it certainly leaves itself in a position where you could do a direct sequel to this movie that could be quite fun. And I would be down for that. Lee Cornyn, much like the compliment I paid M. Night Shyamalan for Knock at the Cabin, Evil Dead Rise in Raimi fashion whips the camera around and does some fun stuff with that to keep things really exciting and interesting. I really dug it. And this is another one of those 4-star movies for me where I thought, this is great. I look forward to going back to it and seeing how it holds up on a repeat viewing. That said, before we wrap things up, I would like to rank the Evil Dead movies. Just the movies, not the series, not Ash vs. Evil Dead. But while I'm thinking about it, I thought, well, it might be kind of fun just to put them in order for me personally. And so for me, it begins with my number one, which is Evil Dead 2. Evil Dead 2, I think, is unassailable. I think it set the template for how to do a movie that is both funny and scary and ridiculous and intense. And it's just an achievement, I think, that is difficult to pull off. So I love Evil Dead 2. It's damn near a perfect movie in my estimation. Second on my list is Evil Dead, the original Raimi film, because it's a honest to goodness terrifying movie. It scared the shit out of me when I was a kid. It still kind of makes me uncomfortable when I watch it now. There's something about the analog vibe to it that still makes it intense and scary to me. I think the original Evil Dead is really, really good. And then this is where things get tricky, because I think Evil Dead Rise is my new number 3, because I do like so much about it. Normally I would say Army of Darkness would be my number 3, but Army of Darkness is campy and silly, but also I get a little bored during the whole light or windmill scene, and the whole London Bridge is falling down thing. It's fine. I enjoy it, but I think I enjoy Evil Dead Rise as a movie, as an experience, more than I enjoy Army of Darkness. I think Army of Darkness is certainly funnier, and I enjoy Bruce Campbell in that movie a tremendous amount. But I think Evil Dead Rise lands at my number 3 with Army of Darkness squeezed out of that plum number 3 spot, and now at number 4. And my least favorite of a series that I think is full of good movies, at the very least, is Evil Dead, the most recent of the Evil Dead, not movies, but that reboot, the one from 2013. Again, a movie it's hard to imagine that's 10 years old now. But yeah, I think that Evil Dead was successful, and it was intense, but also not quite as original as I would like it to have been. And also the characters were just such tremendous dumbasses that it was hard to get behind them. Like Evil Dead Rise, characters do some stupid stuff here and there, but it's mostly from the kids, as you would expect. So, Evil Dead from 2013, number 4 on my list of the 4 movies. But yeah, there you have it. There's my Evil Dead ranking. So go, just sing it from the rooftops. Okay, that's going to do it for this episode. Again, this is a solo one. We'll be doing some more non-solo episodes with actual guests and whatnot. Those are coming, I promise. But right now I'm just still playing a lot of catch up. I'm doing this, editing the next Pick 6, getting ready for finals at school, unpacking some shit so that when I walk around the house, I don't feel like I'm a stranger in my own home, and also kind of licking my wounds from a fairly intense relationship gone bad. So all of those things are happening all at the same time. So bear with me as I'm working through it. I'm fine. Don't worry. I'm in good shape. I'm happy. But busy and stressed for any number of reasons. So we're getting there. All right. Enough of that confessional business. Let's get to some scary shit. Coming up soon, we've got a brand new Heart of Horror right around the corner. We've got some more What You Watching coming. We've got some found footage Fool. And I know what I want to do for the next series on Dark Parade. I just got to get my guests lined up to do it, because I want to do it the right way. So all of that coming very soon. Please be sure you're following on the Discord server. Just go to legionpodcast.com, click on the shows, and then Dark Parade, and you will find not only every back episode and links to subscribe to the podcast and all that fun stuff, but also a link to the Discord server. So if you want to come by and say hi, just know somebody was talking about Coldfish over here in the Discord channel. So, I got to get on that. All right. Have yourselves a great rest of your Wednesday, a great rest of the week. I'll see you right back here in a week. And thank you, as always, for joining the Dark Parade. See you next time.